So in this tutorial, we'll be talking about dynamic processors. So what do I mean by that? I mean compressors, limiters, expanders, and gates. So what do I mean by dynamics? So these processors alter the dynamics. Dynamics are so the varying levels within a sound or a group of sounds. So this leads me to talk about micro and macro dynamics. So microdynamics is the varying dynamics within one sound. So that's an example would be this sound here. And macrodynamics would be varying dynamics with multiple sounds. So I'll just give an example. This is the like a Rhodes sound, and you can see here that it hasn't got very high dynamic range. It's all like squashed and like very forward in the mix, and we'll go into applications soon. And then here you see the varying dynamics. So yeah, the difference between, you see that this has a very high dynamic range because you can see the percussion's very quiet here, and the kick and snare are very loud. So it's quite interesting dynamically, and it can like if you use these processors right, you can make your productions like very interesting. So let's go into more detail in like how I've used a compressor or a gate, expander or limiter in this song here, which I've already gone through, but I'm going to go through really dive down into compression in this series rather than everything else together. So the song series I just did and uploaded, they're more like the processes working together and not. But in this series, I'm just isolating compression and all the different applications because I've not even used every application of compression. I've just used it a lot. That's why I'm using this remix as an example. So the first, just before I'm just going to give a few examples of why you want to alter the dynamics. So if something pokes out in a mix too much and you want to tame it, then you can compress it, and by altering the dynamic range, you could like cut off the louder parts of the sound so that it stays in one position in the mix. So that with this example here, I'll just solo it. You can see the compressor starts working, or the compression's used here, so this part doesn't get a bit too forward in the mix. So you see the dynamic the gain reduction meter went down is because it was taking away the higher levels of this stem here. So that's just one application. And with this one, you can see I've used this compressor here, which I'll be going down into more individual compressors in a later tutorial. But this compressor is to, like I mentioned with macro dynamics, compression can be used to like blend things together, make a whole group sound like they belong together, like that tiniest bit more. So here let's just solo this whole group. So here you can see it, the gain reduction meter is only acting a bit, just so I can catch the transients, because I don't want the compressor to heavily affect the sound, or it can ruin it quite quickly, so you really need to be subtle with these effects here, and here you see it acts a bit more. So yeah, it is controlling a bit of the dynamics as well. So this compressor is doing like multiple things, but only doing them subtly. So I'll go through one more application before I really dive down into more applications in the next tutorials. But another way of using compression is to make things louder. That's the most known use of compression. So when you compress something, you've got a lot more dynamic range. So say if I alter the dynamic range here, I can just cut the top of these sounds, and then I've got all that room to turn it up. So I can reduce the dynamic range because these sounds here will be a lot closer to, well, the quieter dynamics will be a lot closer to the louder dynamics. So you're reducing the dynamic range, and you're able to turn things up louder if you want to. But you don't have to turn things up louder. You don't have to make up for the gain you've taken away. In fact, if you just take away the louder dynamics of the sound, you can push things further back in the mix by not making up for the gain lost. Okay, I think that was a bit in depth, but if you didn't understand that, then I suggest you stay, because I'll be going through a lot more detail in later tutorials. So that's just compression, like expanding and gating. Also upwards compression. That's like another technique I'll be going through. So you can do a lot with compression. But the main thing is, like, why am I using this compressor? Like, what's it doing? It's not an effect you. It's not effects like saturation where you just see how it works. You need to know what you're doing before. You need to vision it before you apply it. It's not like sound design. Like with mixing, you really need to vision it and then try it. And if it doesn't work, then you take it away. But as long as the intention behind putting the compressor here is something, and not just I feel like it. So yeah, I think that explains it. I'll be going through like the settings. I'll be going through the settings of all the dynamic processes in the next tutorials. So yeah, I just wanted to give a quick insight of how you might want to use a compressor, rather than this is how to use a compressor. I think it's good to know applications before learning what a compressor does. So yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next tutorial.